Coming up on First at 4, cities across the U.S. are bracing for more violent protests following the death of George Floyd. And wanting to get outside, some COVID-19 restrictions are lifted at national parks.
And sunshine continues, but we will see those temperatures on the rise heading into the rest of the week. I'll have a look at your forecast right now at 4.
Dedicated to Eastern and Southern Kentucky, this is WYNT Mountain News First at 4.
Good afternoon, I'm Steve Hensley. First at 4, cities are bracing for more protests, even as they clean up from a weekend of chaos. Rage over a Minneapolis police officer charged with killing an African-American man continues to resonate around the nation. CBS's Elise Preston has the latest from New York.
Terrence Floyd brought flowers and prayers to the spot in Minneapolis where his brother George was killed in a deadly encounter with police. He called for an end to the violence that has rocked the nation.
What are y'all doing? Y'all doing nothing, because that's not going to bring my brother back.
Floyd begged the crowd to bring change through political activism rather than the destruction which has scarred cities from coast to coast. Over the weekend, Los Angeles called in the National Guard to help control violent demonstrators.
They have not just caused chaos and damage. They are hijacking a moment and a movement and changing the conversation.
At moments, the protests have led to change. In Fort Lauderdale, an officer was suspended after shoving a kneeling demonstrator to the ground. I can't breathe. Daytime protests in New York have been mostly peaceful, but after dark, some of the gatherings have turned to vandalism and looting.
In Manhattan's iconic Soho district, looters smashed windows and ransacked these high-end stores. Neighbors came out to see the damage.
It was so brazen. They weren't afraid. They weren't embarrassed. They weren't trying to hide their faces.
New York Mayor Bill de Blasio says vandalism will not be tolerated, but understands the need for police reform.
People are demanding more change, and they have every right to, because they're in pain.
In the midst of a giant crowd of protesters in Brooklyn, 2 officers took a knee to show solidarity.
If I can take a knee with the community to garner and broker peace, then I'll get on my knee every day.
1 police officer has been charged in Floyd's death, but activists in Minneapolis are calling for the arrest of 3 others who were there and didn't stop the brutality. Elise Preston, CBS News, New York.
New York's mayor says he is considering putting the city under curfew to help keep the demonstrations under control. President Donald Trump is taking new steps to deal with the protests which have rocked the nation. Some of those protests happen yards away from the president's front door. White House advisors are weighing the idea of the president addressing the nation. Still no word on that yet. On Twitter, he blamed far-left radicals for the violence.
A national Oval Office address is not going to stop Antifa. What's going to stop Antifa is action, and this president is committed to acting on this.
The president held a conference call with governors today, along with law enforcement and national security officials, to discuss quelling the violent protests. He called some governors weak and demanded tougher crackdowns on protesters. Governor Andy Beshear is asking for the release of body cam footage of a deadly shooting during protests in Louisville overnight. Louisville Metro Police said after midnight, a large crowd gathered in front of a food mart and they began to get violent. LMPD officers and the National Guard tried to clear the group out, but when they did, they said someone started shooting. 53-year-old David McAtee was shot and killed during all this. McAtee's mother said he fed police from the restaurant where he worked. She is asking for peace, not violence. Governor Beshear originally scheduled his COVID-19 news conference for 4 o'clock today. That is not happening now, and we are not sure if we will hear from the governor again today. He had a news conference earlier today about the protests in Louisville. Well, protests in Lexington remained mostly peaceful last night as hundreds filled the streets of downtown for a third night. Lexington police officers even kneeled alongside the protesters. The department posted on Facebook that they were thankful for how peaceful those weekend protests were. Lexington Mayor Linda Gorton talked with the protesters about how she can help them and what they can do to make changes.
Over the next couple of weeks, I will organize a group to recommend changes in how we go forward here in Lexington. This group will include citizens, representatives of our faith community, representatives of our courts, urban county council members, and others. We want to learn from other cities and from our own citizens. And this is a wonderful opportunity for us. It's our moment to make change happen going forward.
There was some minor damage throughout the city, including at the Kentucky Theater, but business owners and police do not believe it was tied to the protests. Local businesses say they are pleased with the protesters. The Louisville officer seen on camera firing pepper balls at a news crew will no longer be monitoring protests. The police chief says he is reassigned until an investigation is complete. They did not release his name. You may remember Saturday night, a Wave 3 news reporter was live on the air, as you see there, when an officer held a weapon and faced the crew and fired pepper balls. The reporter was hit and visibly shaken up.
Well, we saw plenty of sunshine once again today. It's been another comfortable and gorgeous day here in the mountains. You'll want to get out and enjoy it this evening because we're going to start to see the temperatures and humidity rise heading into the next couple of days. But first, we're going to take you up to just a few of those cameras to show you how gorgeous it's been throughout the day. Looking at that Pikeville camera, US 119, US 23, not a cloud in the sky, sunshine and very comfortable temperatures. Looking up into Jackson, plenty of sunshine, 74 degrees and feeling like 74 degrees. That dew point in the 30s. We have some very, very dry air, so it feels great out there. Get out and enjoy it. It was great this weekend, still great today, but we are going to start to get a little bit on the warmer side. However, right now, most of us into about the low to mid 70s, some of us closer to the upper 70s down into Harlan, Middlesboro, and over into Monticello. And just because it feels great outside does not mean you don't need the sunscreen. I learned this one the hard way yesterday. That UV index is very high right now, so even if you're only going to be outside in the sun 20-30 minutes, just go ahead, lather up, put on that sunscreen, and get out and enjoy this beautiful evening. We'll continue to see comfortable temperatures, sunshine throughout the rest of the afternoon into the early evening hours. We're looking at a pretty calm night heading into tonight, and we're going to continue to see sunshine heading into tomorrow. I'll have a look at the rest of that 7-day forecast coming up in a little bit.
All right, thank you, Paige. Cumberland Gap National Historical Park reopened sites like the Pinnacle Overlook after closing it due to COVID-19 concerns. WYMT's Dakota Makris is there and has more.
I'm at the Pinnacle Overlook, which has been closed since late March. Now it is reopened and ready for visitors. Restrooms, picnic areas, and the Pinnacle Road are now reopened to visitors. A park ranger tells me she is excited to finally see visitors at these spots again.
I'm in heaven right now. The view is spectacular. We can even see the Smokies in North Carolina today. So I always say it's that trillion-mile view. Right now we can hear the red-eyed vireo calling. The birds are even ecstatic. So we're all very happy. Visitors are really happy that accessibility to the park is increasing. Park officials encourage park visitors to still practice social distancing while in the park to help keep everyone safe. Reporting from the Pinnacle Overlook, I'm Dakota Makris, WYMT Mountain News.
Ranger Carroll, always enthusiastic. The Visitor Center and the Wilderness Row Campground will remain closed. Dakota will have more on the reopenings later tonight. Protests around the country over police brutality are raising fears the mass gatherings could lead to new outbreaks of the coronavirus. As thousands of protesters march through the streets of New York City, Mayor Bill de Blasio is warning of a potential second wave of COVID-19. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announced the number of positive cases in the state has dropped to less than 1,000, the lowest level since the outbreak began. The nation's largest city, which was devastated by the world's deadliest outbreak of COVID-19, is set to begin reopening June 8th. The first human trial of an antibody therapy to treat COVID-19 is now underway. Eli Lilly and Company announced patients in New York, Los Angeles, and Atlanta are now receiving the treatment. The company's chief scientific officer says as soon as the pandemic started, his team went to work to create a new medicine against the disease. The medicine was the result of a blood sample from one of the first U.S. patients who recovered from COVID-19. Researchers then sorted through millions of this patient's cells to find hundreds of antibodies. A man is facing DUI charges after a crash in Laurel County this weekend. Deputies say 38-year-old Eric W. Wright of Somerset, who you see on your screen there, crashed into a semi-truck on Interstate 75. The crash overturned the semi and sent it on its side into a wooded area. The driver was taken to the hospital with possible injuries. The road was closed for several hours. Wright was charged with operating a vehicle under the influence, among other traffic violations. Let's head over to Wall Street now on this Monday afternoon. The Dow closes up today more than 91 points. Pier 1 is officially going out of business. That now allows Pier 1 to liquidate its retail operations in about 500 stores across the country once they can reopen in the wake of the pandemic. Pier 1 had more than 1,000 stores at one point selling home goods like furniture, pillows, and decor. There are stores in Lexington and Johnson City, Tennessee. It struggled because of online competition and big box chains. Pier 1 aims to have all its stores permanently shut down by October. Straight ahead on First at 4, the coronavirus pandemic delayed this year's primary election in Kentucky. We'll talk to the Secretary of State about the changes.
And temperatures will warm up heading into the rest of the week. I'll have a look at those warmer temperatures coming up.